Story 1. I think that it is often true, but it should not excuse someone's actions. Some people are simply unpleasant without having experienced hurt. Story 2. Reddit likes black and white issues and tends to think statements like this either need to be true 100% of the time or they are invalid. They also believe only one thing can be true, so if they see a similar pattern, such as abusers seeking out the abused, that invalidates this. Some opinions are based on ideology, thinking this takes accountability off of abusers and therefore must not be true. Statistically, this is a very valid statement. More accurately stated as hurt people are more likely to hurt people. But true regardless. This does not absolve them of their abuse. It does mean that we have the ability to impact others in dramatic ways, both positive and negative. It is hard to overstate the positive impact of a good mother or father on a child's life. It is also hard to estimate the negative impact of a bad one or an abuser on the same life. Story 3. I was bullied relentlessly in high school by a girl named Sarah. Years later, I found out her father was really abusive. It made me realize she was just projecting her pain onto others. I still do not forgive her, but I understand it better now. Story 4. Many deeply hurt people choose not to continue the cycle. If someone continues the cycle, they are responsible. Story 5. Most child molesters were molested as children. However, studies also show that many perpetrators of rape or sexual assault are overly confident. The idea that bullying is a product of insecurity is not accurate. Bullies are often extremely confident. That is why they feel comfortable doing what they do. Insecure people generally keep to themselves. Story 6. Being hurt can be a reason, but it is not an excuse. You are still fully responsible for all your actions and reactions, but sometimes there is a reason for them. This does not mean you should not be held accountable. Story 7. It is true. When you are taught at a young age that there are no boundaries or rules, you can end up hurting people. I have seen normal children slowly grow into corrupt individuals because they did not have parents who were present. Story 8. People tend to follow in their parents' footsteps. Abusers will abuse. Rapists will rape. Criminals commit crimes. It takes a lot to break the cycle, the system, and the upbringing. I don't think it is always the case, but if you understand that feeling, pain, or emotion, you can probably dish it out too. Story 9. I have never seen the saying used as an excuse for behavior. The saying is meant to help people understand why individuals may harm others, especially in cases of bullying. Story 10. It is absolutely true. That is why it is such a great adult move to finally recognize what you are doing, make amends, and break the cycle. Story 11. As a bullied child, I really hated that adults would say that instead of helping me. Do you want me to feel sorry for the person kicking me when I am curled up on the ground? Story 12. It is true, but there also comes a point in your life where you have to choose how to handle that pain. I have been hurt, but I let that fuel me to be better than that. Story 13. It's a poor excuse. Everyone has been hurt at some point, but not everyone makes a habit of harming others. Interestingly, those who truly understand the feeling often want to protect others from that treatment and emotion. Story 14. I get the point of the phrase hurt people, but I just hear a command twice. Story 15. It is a profound saying. It offers significant perspective on life. A hurt person is someone who is hurting another person. This could be intentional or because they do not realize they are causing pain to someone else. Story 16. No, hurt people tend to get hurt more by others. It is as if we have a mark on our forehead that attracts those who want to cause us pain. Unfortunately, psychology supports this observation. Abusers recognize who they can target based on past abuse, because there is something in our personality that reveals we have been abused in the past, which attracts them. Story 17. It is largely true. When we have been hurt, it is our responsibility to heal so that we do not continue the cycle. Story 18. Absolute nonsense. We are all hurting. Not all of us are unpleasant. There is a lack of accountability in this generation. Story 19. It is accurate. People who are bullied at a young age become withdrawn and paranoid. These are the worst traits for gaining employment. They get angry because their skills do not matter to others as much as their clear introversion and fear. Story 20. Although it is mostly true, I feel it means that people who hurt others do not have to take full accountability for their actions. Being hurt by someone is not an excuse for hurting others. Story 21. It is true, but it really depends on why you are saying it. If you are using it to excuse actions, including excuse your responsibility to respond to said actions, 0 out of 10, do not pass go. If you are using it to explain cycles of violence, shame, and isolation to better understand how we need to handle harm in our communities so everyone can get better instead of falling into the pattern of punishing and abandoning those who do harm, 10 out of 10, that is what it is for. Story 22. My therapist helped me understand this. I was being very mean to my little sister without realizing it because I was struggling with my own depression. Once I started healing, our relationship completely transformed. Story 23. It makes me think of a trapped animal, and I believe that is the most accurate way I've seen the phrase expressed. It's clear when someone acts out because something triggered a pain of theirs. I once mentioned to my dad, a decade after I graduated, that the only state university I would have considered was one that was the rival to the university he attended. His response was to rush at me, and I fully expected to be slapped. This was not unheard of but was extraordinarily rare for him. Most of his maternal family attended that university. I don't want to know what caused him to react that way, but I gathered that his mother was not kind to him. My dad also carried other unpleasant experiences that became part of who he was. I think he had issues stemming from a difficult childhood, but the way he behaved daily and the hurtful things he said were his responsibility. Hurt people, yes, but I believe acute hurt causes lashing out, physically, verbally, or otherwise. Often, the kindest, most empathetic people you meet have also endured bad times. They can reach a breaking point and lash out, but they choose to teach themselves to respond differently. Daily choices forming habits is not what this saying addresses. With one caveat, people mimic what they know. Sometimes they have to learn that behaving differently is possible, a choice and a journey they can take to change what they learned. Story 24. The majority of hurt people do not deal with their pain by hurting others. It still takes an extra ingredient to turn from abused to abuser. Story 25. It is true. However, what is hurtful to some may not be hurtful to others. Hurt is, at its core, a very subjective feeling and experience. I would be more likely to forgive someone who was abused as a child than someone who was given everything as a child and was hurt by hearing no for the first time. However, the pain of holding the hurt is what actually matters to me. I choose to let that go as often as I can. Story 26. It should be taught in schools globally. It is a fact of life. Obviously, not everyone externalizes the hurt they experience. Story 27. I feel that few people were hurt mentally as much as I was during childhood, and I still try my very hardest not to hurt other people at all, let alone as much as I was hurt. The saying is true, but it disregards the fact that the person doing it also needs to either be unpleasant or have the emotional maturity of a toddler. Story 28. Not as an excuse. If you use it to justify yourself, then you need to take a much better look at yourself. Story 29. It is what I say about those who enjoy hurting people. However, those who are victims of hurt are more likely to express empathy because they know what it feels like and do not want anyone to experience what they have. We all respond in different ways to trauma. Story 30. I prefer the phrase misery loves company because, for some people, the hurt or misery is self-inflicted. However, miserable people want to make others as miserable as they are. Story 31. Illogical and irrelevant as all people get hurt. The only difference is the threshold limits or breaking points, but nothing justifies consciously hurting others. Story 32. Not an expert in the field, but I think I have enough first-hand knowledge and experience with being hurt to weigh in. It is generally accurate, but the degree to which people hurt others is unknown. One can be hurt as a child or an adult, physically, mentally, or emotionally. Each type can manifest in different ways and degrees based on the experience. The physically abused can be physically abusive, as it can be associated with either love or hate. The same applies to other types of abuse. Some people, generally those more educated, are able to hide their pain, but it usually manifests through relationship difficulties to lesser degrees. Without therapy, education, communication, and understanding by both the abuser and the abused, the actions can destroy relationships and lives. Left untreated, the hurt are more susceptible to criminal behavior and drug or alcohol abuse. To add insult, those individuals may become the focus of treatment or correction while the underlying hurt is left unaddressed. The prison system is full of people with problems that were never addressed soon enough or at all. Story 33. So, if hurt people, who hurt the first person to spread so much hurt? I remember someone telling me all pedophiles were molested themselves, prompting the same response. If anything, people who are hurt tend to want to stop others from getting hurt. Story 34. It can help you understand someone's hurtful behavior without taking it personally, but that does not make it an excuse or a reason to stay for more of it. Story 35. I think it should never be used to excuse the harm someone inflicts on others. However, it can be used, especially with children, as a prompt to make sure they are doing okay themselves. It should never be viewed as an excuse, but rather as a cry for help. Story 36. I think this can be true, but it is still an excuse. Many who have been hurt or abused do not harm others but become protective instead. Story 37. It is pretty accurate. That is the basis for my core ideology, radical compassion. The problem with that is it is really easy to have in theory, far more difficult in practice, and still needs to be balanced with firm boundaries and a strong sense of self and self-respect. Story 38. I understand that someone could be hurt, but it should not be an excuse to hurt other people. You could take some time off to heal properly before doing anything else. Story 39. I hate when people value phrases significantly more because they fit some sort of English language phenomenon that dresses it up nicely, like using hurt as both an adjective and a verb that take the same form in the same sentence. Story 40. It is common for one act of abuse to cascade. My mother, in a haze of postpartum psychosis right after my birth, strangled my then 3-year-old sister for about 15 seconds before waking up to what she was doing. When I was 3, my then 6-year-old sister started beating and strangling me. My mother had terminal cancer by that point, and my father never stopped the violence. However, I never strangled anyone. The few times I hit another child, I felt horrible and disgusted with myself. I allowed my sister to brutalize me because I believed I deserved it. My sister remained a violent abuser until I cut her off 2 years ago. She no longer hits or strangles, but now destroys people's belongings, threatens to kill herself, or drugs or poisons her victims. I accepted numerous abusive partners because I could not understand love without either codependency or violence. An act of abuse cascaded into one child becoming a lifelong abuser and the other becoming a passive victim for the majority of her life. I have no idea why it happened that way. Story 41. I have a feeling my ex was hurt as a child because of his actions with addiction and being involved with many girls. He is going to be 40 in about 3 weeks, and I don't see him coming clean anytime soon. There is something in him that screams for help, but I could never put my finger on it. I have had female friends of his ask me if he had been abused as a child because of how he acts. I never had an answer, and I don't think I ever will, but it would be easier to understand. Story 42. False in 99% of cases. Powerful people harm others. Men cause physical harm more often than women. People with narcissistic personality disorder, sociopathy, psychopathy, and Machiavellian traits harm others. In summary, people lacking emotional empathy cause harm. The 1% of cases are not ostracized people but ostracized men, as ostracized women direct violence inward. Story 43. I find it to be pretty accurate. Of course, there are always exceptions, but it often seems to be the case. Story 44. It is a truism like any other, that is to say, not always true, but true often enough that it is worth keeping in mind. Story 45. It is accurate, but it is not the whole story. It fits the majority of cases, but some people are broken at a fundamental level. Even if they had the best help available, the best possible family support, and nothing wrong in their life, they would still be harmful to the people around them. Story 46. I think it is a flip of the coin. It really comes down to the person themselves. Some do not. Some will not. Either they want others to hurt like they do, or they do not want others to feel the pain like they do. It is a flip of the coin. Story 47. It is one of those statements that adds nothing to the conversation. Many hurt people do not hurt anyone or get hurt themselves. The scale of hurt received does not always equate to hurt caused. Counterexamples abound. The statement does not help in dealing with people who cause harm. Should we sentence someone differently just because they have suffered at some point in the past? Is a person from a nice background who causes harm guiltier somehow? I feel it has become one of those superficially deep comments added to conversations about harm, culpability, and societal responsibility without adding anything meaningful. Story 48. Reasons are not excuses. Just because you are not in the right headspace when you hurt someone does not entitle you to forgiveness or excuse your actions. If you know you are hurting someone and continue to do it, you still owe them an apology because they did not do anything to provoke you. If the actions are completely out of your control, then it depends. Still apologize because the other person got hurt. However, it was not exactly your fault. Story 49. There is certainly truth to it, but they also need to work on themselves to break the cycle of pain. Story 50. It's an excuse. Ignorant people hurt others. I have been hurt, and I still do not want to intentionally hurt anyone. Saying it is because they are hurting is overused, just as much as religion is. Story 51. It is true, but that does not make it right. I used to get really angry at people like that, but then you find out their background and why they are like that, and I end up just feeling bad for them now. Story 52. It may be true, but it is not necessarily an excuse. You should always choose empathy over revenge. Bullied children should not bully others, but rather understand how it feels and avoid doing that to others. Story 53. It is a remark that, in addition to blaming victims by implying they necessarily repeat the cycle, also serves to psychologize abuse so that we do not have to confront cultural attitudes like male privilege that legitimize violent or toxic behaviors. Story 54. Most people in this discussion agree that even though this statement is mostly true, it does not absolve those causing harm. However, the fact remains that it does. If trauma leads to bad behavior and individuals are not responsible for their trauma, then they cannot be held responsible for hurting others. If you wonder why they should not be responsible for their trauma, ask yourself where the source originated. It always comes from an external source beyond the victim's control. Even if it originated from themselves, it is our responsibility to help those who are victims of such trauma. The compassionate approach is that therapy and rehabilitation are more effective strategies than retribution to resolve issues. Focusing on petty hatreds does not provide anything that care and compassion for someone who was hurt could not achieve. For those who are psychologically incapable of rehabilitation, intent cannot be assigned. They are behaving in accordance with the brain they were given. Understanding that psychopathy is not the fault of the individual transforms desire for revenge into a desire to address a shared problem. That person is unwell, and given the opportunity, everyone would benefit from their recovery. You can hate the way others have been treated and how those actions cause some to internalize or externalize pain, but you cannot logically hold them responsible for their pain. Story 55. It is true, but it does not have to be. If you have ever hurt someone because you were hurting, maybe you need to talk to someone like a therapist. Grief brings out the worst in some people, and while it is true, it does not have to be. I have been in the throes of loss, and I still did my best not to take out my issues on other people. I have never and will never forgive the people who hurt me during those times of loss. It was easy for me personally not to go out of my way to hurt others just to feel better, so I have no patience for someone who does that. I just do not care. It is easy not to be unkind. And it is free. Story 56. I like it. It helped me process and get over my abusive ex. It does not excuse anything she did, but it helps me understand it was not my fault. Thinking about that, I made sure to heal my hurt before getting involved with anyone else to avoid taking it out on them. Story 57. Hurt people, but healed people heal people. Also, your pain is understandable, but it does not excuse your behavior. Understanding the causes of something is not the same as justifying it. Just because you know where it comes from does not mean you have to allow it. Story 58. Is it true? Yes, for the most part. Always remember that it is not your fault what happened to you, but it is your responsibility to heal from it. Story 59. While it can sometimes be true, I think the saying is a double-edged sword because it can discount the fact that sometimes people are just terrible despite having otherwise positive lives. Story 60. Having baggage is rarely seen as a selling point. Victims either continue to be victims or become perpetrators. Most people are not equipped for these challenges. Just witness any of the daily dramas on Reddit communities. Story 61. It's an excuse. Get the help you need. Because if you are hurting people after you got hurt and you are refusing help to work on yourself, you are a bigger asshole than the person who hurt you. Story 62. I hate it. It blames the victim. People are guilty before birth according to this. Many hurt people are not abusers and work very hard to avoid being abusers. Not only were you abused, but now you are accused of being an abuser before you even do anything. This is not factually true. Bullies bully because it works to increase their social standing, not because they are so abused they do not know any better. There are whole nations of people who have endured hardship and produced communities that are supportive and kind. It gives an excuse to abusers, saying, "It is not my fault. My mother used to make me clean my room. That is why I cannot control myself." Gives them excuses and absolves them of blame. This does nothing to make them change. It pressures victims to forgive abusers without the abusers doing anything to earn forgiveness. Saying, "Oh, poor thing, must have bad parents, you have to feel sorry for him," forces sympathy undeservedly. Story 63. I feel like it is a poor excuse for someone to hurt another person or to accept that someone is hurting them. Story 64. It is unacceptable. If that is the case, then every child molester should be given grace because they were probably molested as well. I do not pass the pain of the bush pig and so on to my kids, nor do I pass the abuse from my ex on to others. I do not want others to feel the hurt I have felt. Story 65. A wise man, when unexpectedly betrayed by the people he loves, will seek to fill the world with his blind spite. Yes, the feeling is indeed familiar. I think it is true and a well-recorded proverb throughout history. It is unfortunate that we do not have enough genuine role models for younger people who need help when hurt, beyond professional assistance. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.